The dressing room door at CBS Television City slammed so hard that the sound echoed down the hallway like a gunshot. It was March 17th, 1955, and inside that small fluorescent-lit room, Tony Bennett was staring at the most powerful man in television with a look that could have melted steel. Ed Sullivan, the stone-faced host who could make or break careers with a single gesture, had just said something that no entertainer in America had ever dared to challenge. "You'll sing what I tell you to sing. When I tell you to sing it, and you'll be grateful for the privilege." Sullivan had growled, his cold eyes never leaving Tony's face. "Because without my show, you're nothing but another WAP singer from Queens." The racial slur hung in the air like poison gas, and in that moment, Tony Bennett made a decision that would not only end his relationship with the most important variety show in America, it would nearly destroy his career and change the course of television history. What happened in the next 5 minutes wouldn't just be a fight between two men. It would be a collision between the old guard of television, where hosts wielded absolute power over their guests, and a new generation of artists who refused to compromise their integrity for fame. Tony Bennett was about to take on the most feared man in show business, and the consequences would echo through the entertainment industry for decades. To understand the magnitude of what Tony Bennett was risking that night, you need to understand what Ed Sullivan represented in 1955. The Ed Sullivan Show wasn't just a television program. It was the gateway to American stardom. Sullivan's Sunday night variety show reached 60 million viewers every week, nearly half the population of the United States. An appearance on his show could transform an unknown performer into a household name overnight. A snub from Sullivan could end a career before it began. Ed Sullivan was 54 years old in 1955, a former newspaper columnist who had stumbled into television and discovered he had an almost supernatural ability to sense what American audiences wanted to see. He wasn't particularly charming or telegenic. His stiff delivery and awkward stage presence were the subject of countless jokes, but he had something more valuable than charm. He had power. Absolute, unchallenged power over the biggest platform in entertainment. Sullivan's relationship with performers was purely transactional. He paid them scale wages, often less than they could earn in a nightclub, but he offered something money couldn't buy: exposure to the American mainstream. In return, he expected complete submission. Performers did what Ed Sullivan told them to do, wore what he told them to wear, and sang what he told them to sing. Those who complied were rewarded with return appearances and career-making exposure. Those who didn't were banished forever. Tony Bennett had first appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show in February 1950, when he was still an unknown 23-year-old singer trying to make it in New York. His performance of Boulevard of Broken Dreams had been well received, and Sullivan had invited him back several times over the next few years. Each appearance had helped build Tony's reputation and expand his fan base. But by 1955, Tony was no longer the grateful unknown who would accept any opportunity. Because of You had made Tony a star. Rags to Riches was climbing the charts. He was selling out venues across the country and commanding serious money for his performances. More importantly, he had developed a clear artistic vision and was unwilling to compromise it for anyone, even Ed Sullivan. This evolution from grateful newcomer to confident artist was about to create an explosive confrontation. The trouble began during the afternoon rehearsal on March 17th. Tony had been scheduled to perform Stranger in Paradise, a sophisticated song from the Broadway musical Kismet. He had spent weeks arranging the song with his musicians, crafting an interpretation that showcased both his vocal ability and his growing maturity as an artist. But during the run-through, Sullivan's producer, a nervous man named Bob Precht, approached Tony with a problem. "Tony, we need to make a change." Pritch said, avoiding eye contact. Mr. Sullivan wants you to sing. How much is that doggy in the window instead? Tony stared at him in disbelief. The song was a novelty number that had been a hit for Patti Page, a cute, throwaway tune, with no artistic merit whatsoever. You're joking, Tony said. But Precht wasn't joking. Sullivan had decided that Stranger in Paradise was too sophisticated for his audience, too foreign-sounding for Middle America. Tony tried to reason with Precht, explaining that the song change would make him look foolish, that it went against everything he was trying to build as an artist. But Precht just shrugged helplessly. That's what Mr. Sullivan wants. You know how he is about these things. Tony did know how Sullivan was about these things. The host was notorious for making last-minute changes that served his vision of what his show should be, regardless of how it affected the performers. At 6 p.m., 3 hours before the live broadcast, Tony was summoned to Sullivan's dressing room. The host was sitting behind a desk, still wearing his rehearsal clothes, reviewing the evening script with the cold efficiency of a general planning a battle. He didn't look up when Tony entered. "Sit down, Bennett," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "We need to discuss your song choice." Tony remained standing. "Mr. Sullivan, with all due respect, I'd prefer to stick with Stranger in Paradise. It's a beautiful song, and I've prepared a really special arrangement." Sullivan finally looked up, his expression glacial. "I don't care what you've prepared. This is my show, and I decide what gets performed. You'll sing the doggy song, and you'll be grateful for the opportunity." What happened next would be debated for years among the people who witnessed it. Some said Tony kept his voice level and respectful. Others claimed he raised his voice and pointed at Sullivan, but everyone agreed on what he said. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm not a novelty act. I'm a serious singer, and I won't perform material that makes a mockery of what I'm trying to accomplish. If you can't respect that, then maybe I shouldn't be on your show." The room went dead silent. Sullivan's assistants, who had been shuffling papers and making small talk, froze like deer in headlights. Nobody spoke to Ed Sullivan like that. Nobody questioned his decisions. Nobody challenged his authority. The tension in the room was suffocating. Sullivan stood up slowly, his face darkening with rage. "Listen here, you ungrateful little bastard. I made you. Before my show, you were nobody. You were singing in dingy clubs for drunks and gamblers. I gave you a chance to reach millions of people. And this is how you repay me? By questioning my judgment?" Tony felt his own anger rising, but he kept his voice steady. "You didn't make me, Mr. Sullivan. My music made me. My voice made me. All you did was give me a platform, and I'm grateful for that. But I won't compromise my artistic integrity for anyone, not even you." Sullivan's eyes narrowed to slits. "Your artistic integrity? You think you're some kind of artist? You're a singer, Bennett, a song and dance man. I tell you what to sing, and you sing it. That's how this works." That's when Sullivan said the words that would end their relationship forever. "You'll sing what I tell you to sing, when I tell you to sing it, and you'll be grateful for the privilege, because without my show, you're nothing but another WAP singer from Queens." The racial slur hit Tony like a physical blow. He had faced discrimination before, had been called worse names, but hearing it from Sullivan, a man he had respected, a man who presented himself as a champion of American values, was devastating. Tony looked Sullivan directly in the eye. "Mr. Sullivan, I may be Italian-American, and I may be from Queens, but I'm also an American citizen who fought for this country in World War II. And I'm an artist who won't be bullied by anyone, no matter how powerful they think they are." He turned toward the door, then stopped and looked back. "Find yourself another WAP singer. I'm done." With that, Tony Bennett walked out of Ed Sullivan's dressing room, down the hallway of CBS Television City, and out into the Hollywood night. Behind him, he could hear Sullivan shouting instructions to his staff. "Get me replacement act. I don't care who it is. Get somebody who knows how to show proper respect." The immediate aftermath was brutal. Sullivan used every bit of his influence to punish Tony for his defiance. He called record executives, booking agents, and venue owners, spreading word that Tony Bennett was difficult and unprofessional. He used his newspaper connections to plant negative stories about Tony's attitude and reliability. Most damaging of all, he made it clear that any entertainer who worked with Tony Bennett would not be welcome on the Ed Sullivan Show. Within weeks, Tony began feeling the impact. Several high-profile gigs were mysteriously canceled. Record stores reported that Sullivan had personally called to discourage them from promoting Tony's albums. Radio stations that had been playing his songs suddenly dropped them from rotation. The message was clear: cross Ed Sullivan at your own peril. But Sullivan had underestimated two crucial factors: Tony Bennett's talent and the changing nature of the entertainment industry. While Sullivan was busy trying to destroy Tony's career, the singer was quietly building a different kind of success. He focused on live performances, developing a reputation as one of the most compelling concert performers of his generation. He worked with jazz musicians who respected his artistic integrity. He cultivated relationships with music critics who appreciated his sophisticated approach to popular music. More importantly, Tony's stand against Sullivan began to inspire other performers who were tired of being treated like puppets. Word spread through the entertainment community about what had happened in that dressing room, and many artists found themselves reconsidering their own relationships with powerful television hosts and producers. The cultural shift was gradual but undeniable. By the late 1950s, a new generation of performers was emerging who refused to accept the old rules of television. Rock and roll artists, in particular, were challenging the established order, demanding creative control, and refusing to compromise their vision for mass appeal. Tony's confrontation with Sullivan had helped establish a precedent for artist independence that would influence the entertainment industry for decades. Meanwhile, Sullivan's grip on the industry was beginning to weaken. The rise of rock and roll, the emergence of new television shows, and changing audience tastes all contributed to a decline in his absolute power. By 1960, being banned from the Ed Sullivan Show was no longer the career death sentence it had once been. The irony was that Sullivan needed Tony more than Tony needed Sullivan. As the host's show faced increased competition and declining ratings, he began to realize that his old tactics of intimidation and control were no longer effective. In 1962, 7 years after their confrontation, Sullivan's representatives quietly reached out to Tony's management to discuss a possible reconciliation. Tony's response was characteristically classy but firm. He would consider returning to the show, but only under specific conditions. He would choose his own songs, arrange them as he saw fit, and be treated with the same respect accorded to any guest. Sullivan, faced with the reality that his show needed credible artists more than they needed him, agreed. Tony's return to the Ed Sullivan Show in September 1962 was a quiet triumph. He performed "I Left My Heart in San Francisco" with the same sophisticated arrangement he had wanted to use 7 years earlier. The performance was magnificent, and the audience response was overwhelming. Sullivan, for his part, introduced Tony with genuine warmth and respect. After the show, Sullivan approached Tony backstage. "That was a beautiful performance," he said simply. "Thank you for coming back." Tony nodded. "Thank you for having me." They shook hands, and while they would never be friends, they had reached a mutual understanding built on respect rather than intimidation. Tony continued to appear on the Ed Sullivan Show periodically throughout the 1960s, always on his own terms. Each appearance reinforced his reputation as an artist who would not compromise his vision for anyone. Other performers took note, and the old model of absolute host control gradually gave way to a more collaborative approach. Years later, when asked about his confrontation with Sullivan, Tony would say, "It wasn't personal. Ed was a product of his time, when television hosts had absolute power. But I believed then, and I believe now, that artists have to stand up for their integrity, even when it's difficult." The fight between Tony Bennett and Ed Sullivan was more than just a clash of personalities. It was a defining moment in the evolution of the entertainment industry, marking the beginning of the end of an era when television hosts could dictate terms to artists. Tony's willingness to walk away from the most important show in television established a precedent that would influence generations of performers. Today, the idea of a television host demanding that a major artist perform a novelty song seems almost quaint. But in 1955, it was the norm, and Tony Bennett's refusal to accept it was genuinely revolutionary. He proved that talent, integrity, and persistence could triumph over even the most entrenched systems of power. The dressing room where that confrontation took place no longer exists. CBS Television City has been renovated many times since 1955. But the principle that Tony Bennett defended that night lives on in every artist who refuses to compromise their vision for commercial success, in every performer who stands up to powerful executives, and in every entertainer who believes that artistic integrity is worth fighting for, even when the stakes are highest.